What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fletcher Show podcast. Here with another excellent guest for you guys today. In the studio, the Remax Content Creation Station, we have Mr. Kemy Joseph, aka Mr. You Are Awesome, Mr. Awesome in the flesh. He's a motivational speaker, a keynote speaker, and just an incredibly inspirational individual. And we always have really good conversations. So when you moved back to Miami, I was like naturally like, dude, you're getting on the podcast.
Yeah,
so,
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
So how are you doing?
Life is good. We just experienced a power outage, like that knocked out several blocks of like the Grove area, or I guess Coral Gables, right?
Yeah,
so,
South Miami, Coral Gables.
Miami,
yeah,
it's like where the mall is, and it's like interesting that that's the start of our day of just experiencing a power outage, and we're talking about life and how we kind of move through it. It's like, how do you prepare your day as a business owner, and then you walk out like, I'm gonna make this much money, and then power's out. We focus on the things that are in our control, and there's things that are out of our control that just come out of nowhere, and then we have to readjust. And I appreciate how you were, even when I walked in here, you're like, you know what, the setup's mobile, we'll wait a little bit. When the power comes back on, we'll jump in. If not, we'll go somewhere else. And I think like that, to me, is one of the things I really appreciate about you, is I've seen you transition into this market, into this area, that your mindset of flexibility, of creativity, just is inspiring to how do we actually get through the challenges of life.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny because I was literally setting up the light. I was like almost all set up, and then it was like, and so my first thought was like, okay, hopefully that comes back on because we're about to shoot the podcast. But at the end of the day, like you kind of alluded to how I was like, well, it's mobile, like that mentality of just executing and doing it. Regardless of whatever, transfers to so many areas of life, I feel
absolutely.
like, because so many people are hung up on like the planning phase of things sometimes, and they're, everything's got to be perfectly right, like the light has to be the exact place, and the birds have to be singing a certain song in the morning,
or quiet, and you're like, good luck getting them quiet, bro.
Exactly. So and that's been actually a theme of this podcast so far, because the whole idea of starting a podcast is sort of a newer thing for me. It's not like I've been planning it for a year, and I really didn't have like all the ducks in a row before I started like going ahead and filming and everything. I'm kind of like was doing it on the fly. Like I recorded the first recording before I even had like my logo and the music and stuff finished, and the intro and all that stuff, and the reason that I did it like that isn't because I wasn't prepared. It's because, well, I guess I was technically not prepared, but it's not like a lack of preparing. It was in an effort to just do it, regardless of the hurdles.
It's like interesting. It's like we're preparing along the way. I think somebody said like planning is more important than the plan, right? So because the plan literally would change, but the process, like how do we think things through? How do we like talk through? How do we collaborate? And then we like, okay, because then once our plan encounters an obstacle, we then start planning again. And it's like the planning is more important than the plan, because the plan is going to change no matter what we do.
The plan is always going to change.
And the other part you mentioned, like releasing our expectations, right? I heard from Tony Robbins that our problems only occur when our reality is different than our expectations. So, I've been on film crews before. I've done things where it's just like the planning has been like so meticulous, and we have to get the shot. We got to get the thing right, and that like tightness around our expectation creates the conflict when something changes, and it's just like no, or everybody's frustrated, or we're like the scarcity of time, and we're just kind of scrambling around. It's like, but what if we actually planned more time? For example, like if we knew this shot might take 2 hours longer than we thought, like what if we already had planned that as part of our planning, versus thinking, oh, this is supposed to be easy, and then like the difficulty makes it more frustrating and overwhelming. So it's like, I think this planning is that. So when you stepped into it, we were just talking about this off camera from my, when I used to run You Are Awesome. It's like, I didn't know what I was doing when I started that organization, and it's just like, I just wanted the idea. And throughout the process of figuring it out, I learned some things along the way that it's like, all right, this is awesome. And then once we close the business, it's like the next organization I start will be much stronger, because now I know how to plan better.
100%, man.
You can't get there without getting there. It's like such a weird thing.
The people who do a little bit of planning and then just jump straight into executing and doing versus the people who all that time are executing. The first group of people, they're going to know more about it. No, like hands down every single time because they're actually learning like on the job, so to speak. They're learning as they're doing it versus like just reading a book and, you know, waiting for the sky to open up and the, you know, whatever to be like, all right, now's the moment, you know what I mean? So tell us, introduce yourself to our guests. We're already jumping into the meat and potatoes, which is very characteristic of our conversations. I love it. But who are you? What do you do?
Who am I? What do I do? Big question. So,
what are you up to?
Yeah, we're talking about the life journey. I've had a chance. My name is Kemy Joseph again. I've had a chance to live in multiple worlds, I would say. You know, coming here, first generation immigrant, so Haitian American. So coming from 2 immigrant parents, to me, it's like being like starting in this world of living in kind of poverty or lower income because I have 9 siblings. So just like no way to really like share all those resources. So coming from that world and being an at-risk kid who got expelled in elementary school.
We're gonna get to that story.
So getting expelled in elementary school, being put in like alternative school, and then you know, getting suspended and arrested at school, like all this happening, and then being able to get the mentorship that allowed me to then come to University of Miami, for example, is where we met, right? And getting a scholarship that was like winning the lottery, so like in a whole nother world where getting a chance to just be focused on academics, but getting essentially paid to go to school and the scholarships, and then developing how we met was through this organization, You Are Awesome, and this mission to promote kindness in the world, and you know, becoming like having an opportunity to like get a celebrity type vibe there, this kind of camper celebrity, and then stepping out of that world to go into what happened next, and just very interesting for me, like those double worlds, living in the world of like, you know, being a man of color, and like it's being in a world where I get to talk about prejudice and privilege, and being able to like, realize how much privilege I have and the ways that I can use that, going from like a negative mindset to a positive. Like, to say who am I feel like I'm a person who's getting a chance to live in a lot of different experiences and a lot of different communities, and I feel very honored to be working in a space where it is helping to infuse these ideas with the meat and potatoes you just described, like into more creative and exciting ways. So I do that as a speaker and as a performer are the main ways that I get to do that now, getting to travel all over the country. So just like, you can tell I get so excited. So I'm like trying to put myself in a nutshell, but I would say I'm a human who's motivated to make a big difference in people's lives and in the world as a whole.
That's awesome, man. And that's literally exactly in line with the type of guests that I want to have on this show, which is another reason why it was so natural. And so let's talk about a little bit what came next after that college. Because when you say like campus celebrity, it's no joke. Like literally every single person on the campus knew who you were. And if they didn't know you personally, they knew of you. Or if
somehow
they saw you, they'd be like, oh, that's that guy who had the signs and the You Are Awesome. And I literally talked to someone yesterday. I forgot who it was, but it was somebody who I didn't even know that they went to UM, and they're like, oh, you know, I saw, you know, Kemy on your Instagram, like, dude, you know, he was friends with my friend, you know, such and such, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, dude, he's friends with everybody, you know? And that's exactly, like, you literally were a campus celebrity. And so what happened after that? Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting to go from, you know, University of Miami, like 10,000 students. And if we explain, like, when I came to University of Miami, it really came with an open heart because I had all these scholarships. And so one of the first groups I joined was called Random Acts of Kindness, and just this idea of how do we improve people's day, add a little bit of positivity. And that idea like sparked, I was like, that's what I needed to hear. I was like all in and doing things from like giving free hugs to wearing signs on my chest. That was, I think, to me, the biggest impact for me personally was wearing a sign on my chest every day. Did it for like almost 5 years, right? And the reason it was the biggest impact for me is I actually had to be accountable to my words in like a way that I hadn't been before. Like I could say, oh yeah, I want to be positive. But it's like, I'm literally wearing a sign that says like smile and be happy, for example. And it's like somebody will look at me if I'm not smiling, like, hey, don't remember your sign right there. I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Like I'm literally saying kind of, here's what I believe in the world. And then now I am actively challenging myself to live that. And the interesting part of you know, becoming this this figure was that I would write a message for myself, for example, like spreading love brings peace, or you'll make it through this, whatever. And that was for me, and I put that sign on like you'll make it through this, and then other people would say, oh, I really needed to hear that today.
Dude.
And
you know what's really interesting about the sign thing is, of course I saw you wearing the signs before I ever met you, you know what I mean? And just saying like the whole concept of like somebody's walking around wearing a sign, right, is kind of, it's funny, not
absolutely.
in like a bad way, but it's very different, you
Absolutely.
know? And so you would think like in our society, your first instinct is like, people are probably gonna laugh or snicker, behind your back, but I don't think I ever heard anyone say anything like ridiculing or negative about you doing that. It was, I only ever heard people say positive things about it because of that, what you're saying, like people needed to hear it or needed to see it or read it. And there was even a point like later on into it where other people started wearing the signs too. It was such an impactful thing that it literally became like multiple people were like, you would organize these like, I guess
campaigns,
like,
free hug events. I mean, we did like a fundraiser to Haiti. We did when we started wearing the signs, it also got the first sign I wore was "You Are Awesome," so that was what
the
sparked
OG,
that's what sparked the name of the organization, and that the whole point was it said "You are awesome" versus "I am awesome." It's like, it's to me being a reflection of I'm saying it to you, but when you're reading it, you're saying it to yourself. It's like this whole thing is super meta, but try to keep it on a level of just saying I want to be able to be a beacon or a sign of hope and positivity, and like I said, to be living up to that was a big deal for 4 years of my formative years of like 18 to whatever. It's just like that was hardcore to live that. And we'll talk about some of the hardcore nature of that, but to kind of hit the status that I had at UM, and then go from being in school to actually doing school online was a whole different beast, because then now I'm like not really surrounded by people. I am like more on my own and like really focused on the thoughts, and really emphasize school. That's a little hard compared to someone like me who's like extroverted and social. And but then there was a tragedy in my family that was happening while I was stressing about these online courses, where there was a suicide, and potentially could have been a murder suicide, and it was like hardcore. And I remember like hearing this news as I like had spent like an overnighter trying to work on this paper, being like, why am I stressing about like this writing when I really need to be like making connections with my family and other people? Like, what if I was taken in that situation, or in a situation like that? I would want to actually like make sure I saw the world and got a chance to do some things that were beyond my current awareness. And around there was like the Occupy Wall Street movement happening, so all these people were like upset, 1%, 99%. I was like, well, really, like we're the 100%. Like, how can I be a part of bringing people back together? And so, through a lot of iterations, that's what sparked the kindness tour, like jumping on a scooter and traveling all over the country. And so, hey, people like, did you really want to start in a scooter? It's like, no, I wanted to start in a van, but I had to work with my resources. It's like eventually we got like a $5,000 like donation, and then the scooter company donated the scooter. So like all these things came together to where it's like, well, I'm gonna tour the country on a scooter. And that was the first major thing I did after college, and that was 10 months, 22,000 miles. It was like epic, insane, like wild. I got to meet people. This was when couch surfing was still a big thing. So I got random people letting me stay in their house. Airbnb kind of like washed that out now, where people can monetize it. But before Airbnb, you could like use couchsurfing.com and just request to stay with people. And I would stay in a stranger's home. People would like see me on the street and be like, you don't look like you belong here, because I'm like, I have a big sale. I'm on a scooter. I got got a sign on my chest. I got this big backpack. They're like, you look like you're not from around here. What's going on? And then we'd be talking, and like, do you want to stay at our house? And it's like, people would ask me if I felt scared. I was like, yeah, sometimes, but like, they're having a random stranger. I think we were both navigating this space of like, all right, what's going on? Can we trust each other? And I didn't feel unsafe, besides maybe fear in my mind. I didn't feel like actually unsafe anywhere I went, which is like, I say that because, the same people who were around in that time, which was 2012, are the same people who are in this country now. And it's like, we were saying oh, some Americans are hating and yada yada, but it's like those same people were around in 2012, right? And it's like, I got a chance to experience this country and feel like I could be a young black male, roaming around. But that was also around the same time that the Trayvon situation happened here in Florida. You know, so like it's still on my mind of like being careful of where I am going and how I am, how people are perceiving me. But overall, I felt very taken care of in that journey until I crashed in San Francisco. So like I made it from here all the way to San Francisco, no situation, and then I actually crashed, and that you know, caused a whole synopsis or series of injuries to develop. So I've been like working on that since 2012. So I feel like since then I kind of went from having this big, you know, presence to kind of honing it down to really take care of myself. And like now you're catching me at a time where I'm about to like unleash it again. So it's just like I feel like I've been recovering and like really strengthening who I am in order to like be back out there in a big way.
Yeah. So even though you're saying that you kind of have like honed in and stuff, you still have been traveling and speaking. And so what kind of speaking engagements have you been doing recently?
Yeah, I get a chance to speak on resilience, on leadership and climate building. And the thing that I'm personally working on is more around this prejudice and how can we end suffering in the world. You know, there's a difference between pain and suffering. Like pain is like inevitable, like we're going to experience pain, but suffering is this idea that we can't change it or that we add extra meaning to our pain that makes us make us feel more trapped in it. So being able to, you know, have pain but end suffering and be able to heal the prejudice and discrimination we're having in our world. So that's what I'm like. These are what I get to talk about. And so the difference was when I was in UM, it felt like it was a lot more like pushing. Like I was trying to push things out, push messages out. I get a chance now to work with a couple of organizations who I really believe in, and they give me a chance to speak on their behalf. And I feel like I can really, I don't have to push as much. Like I'm getting opportunities to speak. People are wanting to hear what I have to say or wanting to hear what these organizations are offering, and I get to be a conduit of those messages. And it's just different than, you know, me feeling like I had to prove something. Like I think when I was in college, it felt more so that I had to prove something or I had to like validate that I was supposed to be on that campus or that I deserved to have the scholarship. And so I think in some of that way, it felt way more intense. Like going back to what we were talking about scarcity, like I had to do it, otherwise I would feel like a failure. Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm good. Like I get to do what I love this time around. Like I love what I was doing before, but I was creating way more suffering in the way I was doing it versus now I can do what I want and move forward in a way that feels more sustainable and like enjoyable.
That's extremely interesting because, first of all, your own personal journey, you know, is very interesting. And then also how the message that you're putting out there, although there's been a lot of consistency in it, the kind of the format of how you're putting out there, or the, I guess, some of the intention behind it has also shifted. And I would venture to guess that the people who are hearing it are impacted in a different way as well.
Absolutely.
So how, like, what kind of impact are you seeing from the people? Because I know that you mostly speak to schools, to kids and stuff like that.
Right now I'm mostly speaking to adults too, right? So like working with a lot of administrators, faculty members. So like that's the primary thing I'm doing now. And as I'm transitioning into more corporate space, it went from like working with kids, working with adults, and then, you know, now working with companies. So the message, like you said, it's kind of been, it's just, I think it's matured. You know, when I was, you know, when I was younger, it's just like, oh, I still believe this, like kindness is a great thing, right? And that could convince me, oh, like let's be kind. I should say when I was in like my, you know, early adulthood, whereas like as a teenager, man, that was like, kindness is so weird, like, you know, so many terms that I use that it's like, you know, I did not embrace that message growing up for sure. It was just like I was a kid who would be in the back of the assembly like, this is so stupid, like why are we even here, like. And so I kind of speak to that kid as often as I can because you know it's saying getting a chance to live in both worlds, just realize this world over here of all this negativity and like skepticism and criticism, that was keeping me trapped in all those things, and I didn't get a chance to actually enjoy life, because even if something was fun, I would be afraid of you judging me or then me judging myself. It's like, well, this, like I keep myself in a straitjacket if I'm trying to like be super cool and all that. So what if I allow myself to kind of step over here, and the more I got a chance to be in a more positive mindset or a more productive and enjoyable mindset, I realized I was breaking the cycle. Like I was breaking this negativity cycle. So for me, that's been the underlying message, is like helping people break out of that negativity cycle. Originally it was with kindness, and now it's with like kind of mental health, social emotional health, like helping people be resilient against the negativity or like thought viruses that we're kind of being infected by. So it's just kind of matured along that way, especially as I'm talking to adults and people who are older and wiser than me, like being able to present a message in a new way with the same exciting premise as I did when I was like giving free hugs, but to be, you know, maybe more academic or scientific with it to make sure that it actually lasts. It's a truth. It's a something I can be in integrity with, and something that people can actually use.
Yeah. I think it goes without saying, you know, anyone with a pair of eyes can see that the way our society is set up, and I don't necessarily mean this in like a conspiratorial way, it's just how things happen to be, kind of teaches us, you know, indirectly and sometimes directly, depending on your experiences in life, to kind of have that negative mindset and attitude from a very young age. And a lot of those kids, you know, like with their arms crossed at the back, they grow up to be adults with their arms crossed at the back. You know what I mean? So is there any hope for those adults, and how do you speak to those people who are just, no matter what positivity you're putting out there, no matter how clear your message is, there's always an excuse, there's always a reason why, oh, you know, that's bullshit, you know, you're just, you know, pie in the sky, you're ideological, and, you know, life isn't so, you know, butterflies and rainbows as you're telling me it is, and, you know, how do you reach those, can you reach those people, or are they too far gone?
No, there's so many layers to that. I remember when I was getting ready to do the tour, again, getting ready to tour the country, and at that point I thought I was going to tour the whole world, and I met this like 8-year-old girl. I don't even know how we met, how this all came together, but I mentioned to her, yeah, I'm getting ready to go tour the country and, like, you know, change the world with kindness, and she literally looked at me, she's like, that's impossible. I was like, you're 8 years old, like, how do you even know that word? Like, you know, how are you already limiting yourself? I mean, you don't even know me, you're already limiting me. It's just like, it's like kind of like that person, like I imagine her like growing up and like, in the back of a room, that's impossible. I love that experience when those folks open up a little bit, you know, because like I see it all the time. It's like when I walk into a room, especially if I only have an hour, sometimes I'm training for a day or two, within that first like 30 minutes, I kind of have to like, one, let them know who I am, two, invite them in to participate however it makes them more comfortable. And for a very brief time, I was a bar mitzvah dancer. So I got awesome company,
That's
awesome
dope.
experience. And the reason I say that is part of my job was literally to go and help make people comfortable at a party. And you know, I'm labeled as a dancer, and like, you know, trying to get people on the dance floor, getting the kids moving. But then I would I would always go and work the perimeter. And I think one of the lessons that stood out to me there was that if I saw like you and you were, you know, at a table far away, I might even say, looks like you got the best spot in the room. Like, you can be here without, you know, having to be so close to music. And people be like, yeah, like, or I see a group over here, and I'm just like, you know, I sit at the table and just kind of bop around a little bit, like, y'all doing a great job. It's like just kind of giving people permission to be where they are versus saying, you have to come and dance. Like, everybody, it has to look like, this is what participation has to look like. And I think the fact that giving people permission to be skeptical, like, yo, I would totally be skeptical, like, you know, come along when you're ready, or like, hey, this is going to be cheesy, or hey, let's do this and have a little fun, and just inviting them to participate in ways that are low risk but high reward, I think, is the hope of getting, because I've seen it over and over again where eventually people come along. And I also, what you're saying of, is there hope for them? Absolutely. Am I the hope for them? Maybe not. Like, you know, that they're like, sometimes I have to know, like, I'm not the person for them. Like, I can be a part of the process, like, but maybe if I, like, you know, do it and then, you know, I leave them alone, next time when you come and speak, they're like, oh, okay, the speaker is like, I can be myself in assembly. Then they're more receptive to you and your message in that time. And it's like, I think that's what I've realized is I can keep doing what I love to do, and then there's going to be people who are ready to receive it at that point. And at the same time, I'm setting the stage for another part of their growth.
Man, everything you just said is super powerful, I feel like, because first of all, the whole permission thing, right? Because a lot of times people don't give themselves permission, you know what I mean? Which sounds silly to say. It's like,
it's very real.
You know, how am I going to give myself permission, you know? But it's very real because, you know, like those people sitting in the back, you know, just the idea of someone coming up and saying like, you have to do this, you know, people want to naturally resist, you know, and so kind of opening up, planting the seed, or just straight up being the watering can and being okay with it on your end, however this person resonates with me is totally okay, and by the very essence of doing that, you're giving them permission to be who they are, you know, and that I feel like is a central like pillar of a lot of your messages and when I was in, you know, making music actively and touring and stuff, that was a central part of a lot of my lyrics too, is like really just like empowering people to, you know, accept who they are and just be who they are to the fullest, you know, and I think that that's such a powerful message because we live in a society where, you know, you're told to do this a certain way, you're told to be like this, be like that, you got a white picket fence and all that, you know, like, if not any shade on that, if it works, but, you know, there's like a set of parameters that are expected of people, and not everybody fits into that box, and I think that, you know, having that mentality of like, we're gonna get out there and we're going to let people know it's okay to not fit in the box. You know? It's so powerful, man. It's so freaking powerful.
It takes work, though, you know? It's like, I think that's the, like, so I heard his TED Talk, I forget the person's name, but she said, you know, diversity is the new normal. It's like, I think when basically what you just said, like, the box was like, oh, this is normal, white picket fence, yada. It's like, oh, this is normal. So everything outside of that is diversity. And it's like, well, if everything outside of here is diversity, that means, like, diversity is the new normal. Maybe this is the abnormal now, maybe. And I think that's part of the challenge. Is like, do these people still get permission to be who they want to be? And so I think it's like this line that we're walking where you hit it right on the head. It's like when people feel like they're being forced to do something, it's just already like triggers us. Like, I was just doing a group recently, and we had a huge conference room for like 30 people because we were doing big different sessions. And like people had like just sat down after I made the announcement to like, hey, everybody come closer. And like I could see the disappointment on their face because they were like in the third row. I'm like, everybody in the second row. Like I went over there. I was like, yeah, thank y'all for coming over. But they barely sat down, but their minds had already like made an expectation. We're gonna sit here. We're gonna be this far back. And it's just like, come on, people, please come up for it. And it's just those kind of things where even in that moment, I could see like that was a small negotiation. But imagine if that was saying like, you had to live in a certain area or that you couldn't live in a certain area, you know, and based on somebody else making a decision. I think it's those kind of things that we are kind of discounting how powerful that is. And I think that's where my laser sharp focus is. Like, for me, racism and all these other isms like sexism, to me, those are all symptoms. Like, the core of it is these things we're talking about where like we are our power to actually feel like we have permission to be who we are and make decisions that are in alignment. And I think, you know, going back to living in these both worlds, like that's where I've seen in my personal journey where, I had rules that told me I couldn't say whatever words, we don't need to list them here, but it wasn't until I actually had relationships that that gave me the permission to change who I wanted to be in the world, like that said, oh, I'm going to actually embrace, you know, the political correctness, or I'm going to embrace more gender norms. I'm going to embrace people who are outside of my normal. I'm going to embrace more diversity. That's a very personal journey. I think we're trying to like legislate that journey. And it's like we can barely legislate traffic out there. It's like people do crazy things.
Right.
We have rules, we have cops, and people still do nuts things. So it's like it's not about like putting more rules. It's like, how do we kind of inspire the hearts and minds? And I think part of it is giving people permission to start where they're at.
Yeah, it is a fine line, you know, because, you know, how far do you want to go with the argument, you know? Like, just because you legislate away murder doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to stop or allow more murders. Like, people are going to murder, you know what I mean? Murder is going to murder, you know? And you know, I think, you know, that's an extreme example, you know, but it's like you want to have certain rules in society where it's like, you there's a certain line where like you can't be this horrible of a person, you know what I mean? Like, you can be horrible up to this point, but you can't go over that line.
Go over the line.
You know, but at the same time, what you're saying is 100% correct, because you can't force people to not want to cross that line. You can only inspire them to decide for themselves that they don't want to cross that line. And, you know, as far as like racism and stuff, growing up in Atlanta and then moving down here to Miami, night and day. You know, I firsthand witnessed, you know, growing up and seeing all the norms in that area, which, you know, no shade to Atlanta, but it's certainly not, and not Atlanta, but the northern suburbs that are like 99.9% white, you know, and nothing against that, but that the norms that come along with it were so counter to the norms down here. And like what you're saying about the diversity being the new norm, that was so illustrated for me when I moved down here because I had no idea, you know, what diversity even was.
Yeah,
you know,
it's another level down here.
So
for sure.
until there's some kind of stimuli, like being inspired to think a different way, or being in a new situation where you experience things in a different way, people aren't going to have the ability to expand their worldview until they're in that situation, or they're being inspired by that new information that makes them think in a different way. You know what I mean? Because, you know, for me, growing up, I would hear certain jokes and, you know, I didn't think they were funny, but it didn't have the same reaction for me that it does now, because it was just so normal. You know, it's just like, okay, you know. And then now when I hear people make certain jokes, it's like, we'll call them out, like, you know, that's not cool, you know what I mean? Like, you know that's like totally whack and you sound like an idiot, you know what I mean? Whereas before it was just so commonplace, you know, and not necessarily about just racism, sexism too. Man, sexism is, in my opinion, take it for what it's worth, is, I think, the most, like, baked into our DNA of any of the isms.
Well, yeah, because it has, like, gender roles and then class. I mean, it's like we see that one portrayed. I mean, this is why we're talking about it. It's like there's so many, and you know, we used to call it, this is locker room talk, and I was like, I never really felt comfortable with locker room talk. It's like maybe because I have 7 sisters, I'm like, bro, I don't like to hear that kind of stuff about anybody. It's like, you know, I'll talk with my friends about you know, like, oh, people, the girls that I like, or, you know, what I like about women, and it's like, it just felt weird to feel like they're going to be you know, treated lesser than. And I think that's the kind of challenge, like, people are treated lesser than for whatever the thing is. And growing up here, it's like we're talking about racism and all this. It's like it's crazy to me how far back this goes. You know, it's not before it was about skin color. You know, it's basically just about difference. It's like whether the difference is religion, whether that difference is someone, how they actually look, or what they sound like, or what they celebrate. It's like basically like it's about someone's culture. And then we're seeing, like you said, to go from Atlanta or the suburbs of Atlanta, there's a whole different culture up there, and coming here, and there's like all these little pockets of culture. And I used to live in Eugene for 5 years. So after leaving UM and doing that tour, I landed in Eugene, and it's predominantly white up there. I mean, I think, like, you know, the black population is like maybe 2% or something like that. So it is it's very Caucasian there. And it to me, it was interesting, like, when there was a majority, like, okay, so white majority, there was way more conversations about how does the majority incorporate the minority, like, how, you know, whether it's Hispanic or black or Asian, whatever. But then here, I don't know who the majority is.
Latinos is like 64%.
But then would Latinos all feel like they're all Latinos, right?
No,
so that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
So we can say majority is Latino, but then you're like, oh, there's Cuban, there's Mexican, there's, you know, Honduran. My barber yesterday was Honduran. I'm like, all right, dude, let's talk about life. You know, it's just like, it's interesting that there's so many minority groups here that then there's less of an integration at least from my perspective, there's less of an integration conversation, because people are still trying to protect their own groups and make sure they get their equal treatment and equal rights. And it's like, oh, this is so much different than the conversation happening nationally, where it's still, outside of Miami, for example, predominantly white in our country. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of variations of the same conversation happening, and to assume that everybody's going to have that conversation the same way, first of all, is not happening. And then to assume that people are going to all agree, it's like, I don't think those two things are what I'm even aiming for.
Can't even get people to agree on toppings on a pizza.
Yeah, exactly. And we have so many options too. Like, one of the things I'm working on is this idea that the beautiful thing is that we're in an age of permission. Like literally, you can find a group that supports what you want to do. Like even if it's like terrible, like you were saying, like oh, you know, when the laws, you know, want to stop us here. There's a whole group who lives outside of the law, who can be with other people who like essentially give them permission or like just validate their existence.
What they're doing,
and,
what they're
and
thinking.
it's like, and everybody has that now with the internet. So it's like, technically, what it actually would inspire somebody to do things differently. And I think that's where my mind is racking, is like, if it's about the individual, how do we get the individual to make a choice? But we also have to acknowledge that choice is like kind of scary and difficult when they might be the only one in their little pocket of people who is deciding to do things differently.
Yeah, man, and it's so hard, especially when, you know, going back to the little kid in the back of the room, when you go from that little kid with their arms crossed in the back of the room to the adult. Once you reach that adult stage, it's so much harder, you know.
But the habit has been established.
The habit is your lifelong thing, you know what I mean? And like, you know, speaking to the population down here in Miami, I didn't know before I moved down here that there are like within the Latino community, there are like countries that, you know, like denigrate other like ethnicities of Latinos, and it's to me I was like, what, you know, like okay, so that's a thing, and you know, and you experience it all down here, which is great, but also can be terrible. You know what I mean? Like being in Miami was the first time I experienced bigotry towards white people, you know, which it's only happened a couple times. I'm not like playing like the victim, just illustrating that it's all kinds of
Some
stuff
places
going
you
on
go,
down
you
here.
will be a minority, right?
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
That's a very interesting thing.
And to me, like, what's interesting is, and tying this back into like what you do. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen the interviews of like the former Klan members and like why they kind of came back to reason?
A little bit of those, and yes, if you have a story you want to share, absolutely, because I think those things are so fascinating, right? And
Super
it's like,
fascinating.
And it's to just know what helps somebody translate over. So go for it.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, and I mean, I don't know, I've maybe seen like 2 or 3 interviews, but between that, you know, non-statistically significant population of data, what seems to be a common thread is that they met somebody from the other community that they felt these very strong feelings about for so many years, and it turned out that person was the opposite of what they expected them to be, and they either like A, became good friends, or B, like they were became part of their family or something, you know, to that extent. And I think, you know, that to me that ties into like what you're doing as a speaker, because you're going into a situation where you know, there could be 100, 1,000, thousands of people, you know, that you're speaking to. So there's all these, you know, infinitely different stories and scenarios that have happened in this one room, and you're coming with a central message, but that you're trying to have it, you know, incorporated in a way that it affects everybody in a real way, you know, and I think that, you know, the way that you do it is very, I think it's very effective, is you're basically showing up to all these different people and coming with this central message, and whatever they might have a, you know, general idea or a, you know, preconception of what they're about to hear from you, you're blowing that out of the water. You're shattering every single preconception or whatever they might have about what they're about to hear, and that speaks to that idea of like actually meeting that different person and actually getting, you know, that different perspective, and to people who are open and receptive to it, that's going to change something in their head, whether it plants a seed or whether it sprouts the new, you know, root or whatever, you know?
Yeah, like sometimes, like if you think of the gardening metaphor, it's like, if I'm the gardener, I can't force the plant to grow, right? Like part of what I'm going to do is like clear some of the weeds or clear some of the things that might be impairing it, you know, continually give water and fertilizer. So that's what I think I do as a speaker. It's like if I can help help people untangle some of the knots in their minds and then be a part of that, and it's like, all right, here, now it's fertile ground. Let's plant some ideas. Let them pick the ones that make the most sense, and then it grows from there. I think that's where it requires me not to take it personal if they don't really like the message or whatever, because it's like that's where they're at. And it's interesting what you've been mentioning of going in as a speaker. My goal is to create experiences. Like what you just described is like, hey, they had an experience with somebody from across the line, whatever that line is, across the line. It's giving people a chance to be like, okay, I had an experience with you, and we literally say this is the foundation for most of the changes, having shared experiences, having different experiences, having positive experiences. Like when we think about who gives us information and how we receive that information, I love this idea of being woke, right? It's like, so if you're woke, how did you wake up? Like if you wake me up and say, hey Kemy, like we got to get ready for the day, like that's a sweeter approach. I can receive you better. Like if you're like, yo Kemy, get out of bed, like or water on my face, like it's gonna be hard for me to like consciously think, all right, this person's trying to help me. Like and there's times where you would need both, but I like to take the approach of like, all right, how do I get the person to be most receptive to me? And I think there's some hardcore people out there who are like, Kemy, that's a little soft. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, my goal is like, how do I effectively make sure I reach somebody? So if I gotta go kind of like this in order for them to finally get it, fantastic. Versus like trying to bulldoze that point, because we can actually force people to listen to us, but we can't force anyone to learn from us.
Yeah.
Like, we can educate people all day, but we can't force them to actually learn. And I think that's reminds me of, again, the permission, treating people as the experts of themselves, to say, you decide when you're ready to embrace the change. Like, again, I can law you up. I can say, you have to do this, and only you can be like, oh, okay, I'm actually going to follow the speed limit, or I'm going to respect another human life. Like, you have to actively make that choice to embrace whatever the rules and laws. And so, to me, that it takes some of the pressure off, and it kind of helps me sleep at night, knowing that, like, I'm doing my absolute best. And there's reasons people make the choices they make. Like, I've made some terrible choices, and I think, again, back to living in those two worlds, like, for example, when I was touring the country, what made it so powerful to me was that I was in people's homes, and they left me alone. Like, they'd be gone doing whatever, or sometimes even gone at work. And some of them, or most of them, had no idea that when I was a teenager, I had like broken and entered into people's homes, and I had like violated their trust, and I stole from them, and even stealing from my friends, and like, and seeing how that hurt them, how that broke relationships. Like, one family actually moved out of the neighborhood because of what I did. Wow. And then to be here, like, maybe a decade later, like, in people's homes where they would never even think that of me, where like I had changed my whole way of being in order to just be in this place. Like, those are the small things that I appreciated. It was just like, wow, look at where I am, and what it actually, like, the rules are still there. Don't steal from people. That rule existed the whole time. But it's like, at this point, I was in this zone where it's like, well, I don't have enough in my life, so they have more than me. They're not gonna, I can just take this, or I'm never gonna get it unless I go get it. Versus now, I'm like, oh, I can work for it, and it feels better that I can enjoy it without taking it away from anybody else. And people are actually more happy to share it with me when I am working towards what I want, and I'm sharing what I have as well. So, again, the rules were still there. I had to change in order to embrace that. And I think that's a small example of, when we're talking about racism, sexism, whatever, it's like, the rules are already in place. We have to just choose how we're going to embrace them. And again, people have valid reasons for both. So I would like to give as many experiences that help people move from this negative or scarcity or defensive place to a place of like celebrating, embracing, being in abundance, being in a place where they feel like they can be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, I think I've always had this opinion too, since like high school, that the majority, if not almost all, of human behavior and decisions ultimately boils down to a level of fear.
Yeah.
And or another way of saying it is that fear is the greatest driver of human action.
One of them.
If you look back in history, every war, every major event that started a conflict or anything like that, and even policies and governments and things, people do things based on fear of what they don't know.
Well, that's what they kind of like the pain or pleasure, right? It's like a lot of this is out of fear, and then the other idea is like, oh, if we get more of this, then we're gonna increase our pleasure. Like, we're trying to move away from fear. Absolutely, it's like that's kind of like it said pain or pleasure, and like so if we imagine fear down here, then it's like pain or pleasure. Are we gonna take fear and just focus on the pain of it? That's what drives us, or fear and the pleasure of getting away from fear, right? So those like absolutely what you're saying, and then how we respond to that makes a huge difference. And I think that's where I'm seeing in my life now, where like I'm still facing fear. Like it's kind of one of those things where like we're not going to get away from fear. It's like can't get away from pain either. It's like which way do we use it? One of the things we teach in this group called Why Try, there's been phenomenal organization to work with. It's called the battery, and it's like like for example, this idea that if you were going to jump a dead battery, like to restart it, could you just use the positive charge? And the answer is no. Like we have to use positive and negative. So it's like in this world right now, where it's like, oh, we're trying to avoid pain and or like just go towards pleasure. This is positive psychology. It's like, oh, everybody's gotta just be kind. It's like, no. What if we're like mad? How do we use that too? It's like I'm pissed about some things in the world. It's like, how do I use both of those to like actually like boom, laser sharp focus of like using my negative energy in a more productive way versus before I used to destroy things, destroy relationships, destroy myself because of that negativity. And, you know, I think if we go full circle back to this idea of giving permission, when I was doing Mr. You Are Awesome, like I didn't give myself permission to actually express this negativity. Like I actually created a trap for myself where it's like, oh, like people didn't expect me to be so positive and I expect myself. So it's like, if I'm gonna be sad or have a difficulty, that's gonna be a private moment. All the positive is going to be the public moment. It's kind of like what we're seeing on social media and stuff like that.
You kind of created this character that was always on stage, basically.
And then so Mr. You're Awesome in many ways to me was like a hero, and I was like trying to live up to that as a person, and at the same time I was like closing off myself. So there was many moments like even from a kid I was depressed. I think from like being 8 years old or something like that, around the time where I getting expelled and all that. And it's interesting of like seeing that theme carry on throughout my life and still today where it's like, oh, there's moments where it gets me, but like in that point I had like isolated myself to where I had great friends and all that, but maybe wasn't sharing the vulnerability of what I was actually going through. And so you know, there's times where I was on the tour and I'm literally by myself, like I'm on for hours, that there was like a thought like, all right, I never wanted to like kill myself, but if I had passed away in like an epic tour, I would be fine with that, right? It was just like trying to find a way to escape, and I think this silent pain that most people wouldn't have even like, you know, picked up from me in my private moments was the things that would cause someone like Robin Williams, you know, to take their life, where it's like, you know, people who can have this huge personality may not actually give themselves permission to do the other things that make us human, like express the negativity, embrace it. And so for me, that part of what allows me to give permission to other people is like, yo, there's a lot of people going through silent pain right now, and the fears that we have, and if I can be a part of helping to calm those down, that's like what my ultimate goal will be, because then people can be more receptive, people can express what's going on and like actually like heal some of the pain. So like now when I say heal, like I'm not talking like just a woo-ha thing. It's like I really had to like figure out what was at the core of my depression and like what was at the core of some of my traumas, and like actually like forgive, you know, myself, forgive other people, you know, make whatever kind of amends, like actually heal my body through all this, and figure out who do I actually want to be to allow that fuller expression to come out. And I think now it just feels more like the best version of who I have been so far, because I'm letting myself be the full the gambit of, you know, angry, sad, all that, to like happy, positive, euphoric, and grateful.
Back from the technical difficulties. So you were mentioning your being on tour and going through that kind of silent pain and stuff. And I was saying, I think that's, you know, such a common, you know, like it's the most human story ever, because, you know, everyone has moments of either sadness, severe sadness, or depression to one degree or another, you know what I mean? And so, you know, I know for me, I've experienced that as well.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like a day I woke up and I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so for you, was it like a moment that you snapped out of it, or was it a process to get out of that?
It was definitely a process. I was explaining my last after the tour, I lost all these like ways that I was commonly used to like proving myself or getting people to like give me love. And so I was in my apartment one night, and this has been like the saddest night. I was all alone, and I was having just like feeling this pain, like it was the suffering when I was saying the difference between like, oh, this is never gonna change. That's when the suffering was kicking in. This is all my fault. Why was I on this tour? Blah blah blah. All this blaming on myself. And I just heard this song that like in my own voice that was saying, I love you every day. I'm grateful that you're alive. I love you every day. I'm grateful that you're alive. And like that bawling, I was just started crying, man. I was just like, it was like this whole journey back to self-love versus like everybody else's love. And it was just kind of this small thing that said, okay, as long as if I love myself and choose to be alive, I can make things better. And I think that was the decision of saying, all right, I'm gonna stay alive. Like I'm not gonna be trying to like just throw myself out there to die. I'm gonna stay alive, and then I'm gonna choose to find gratitude. And and it's funny because like I would go to doctors and they have this whole list of things that I have, but there's like a whole list of things I didn't have. Like, total of other diseases I never heard about. I was like, all right, I'm grateful I don't have just like starting to find like small things. And it's like people think like gratitude is this woo-ha thing. It's like, no, man, gratitude is like the basis of self-talk. It's like, what do I have control over? It's like I have control over what I'm thinking, and then I have control over how I'm going to interpret the situation. I have control over what I'm going to be grateful for. And the more I found things to be grateful for, like even like just being able to wake up in a quiet home or wake up if the sun was out shining, like I could use that as a seed to move forward. And I think when you say it's like, to me, it's like it's many decisions throughout the day and throughout my life to build this strength against, I would say, or the strength to be able to like, if depression is something like pressing on me and I feel like I'm holding this weight and I'm being crushed by it, I would say this journey has been like strengthening myself to be able to lift that weight better. And to say, all right, if this is not going away, maybe it's not going to go away. Like, how do I stay strong enough? Like, and then how do I build support? So it's like I'm not the only one holding it. Like, do I build a support column? And now it's like, oh, this kind of like prison is not seeming as bad. And eventually I know I can create a door for myself, and I can actually walk out of there knowing that this is still a familiar place. I'm going to want to go back here. And when the things are really difficult, or not even want to, like I'm probably going to be pulled back into it. But I know how to handle it better than. And so I don't know if it is going to go away for me. And I think it's, instead of making it go away, how do I use it to like build an unrelenting like strength around kindness and positivity and uplifting myself, which helps me be strategic in how I uplift others.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love that description, and it's kind of like I feel a more detailed description of what was going on in my head, because I just was like sick of feeling that way.
Yeah.
So it was my creating the support column for myself was just like that idea of like waking up and thinking like I'm not gonna feel like this today.
Yeah.
Today is a new day. Today is the day that I'm gonna feel different than I've felt for the last months or whatever it was.
Made a decision.
And that was it. Just that decision to start the day off like with a different idea, different mentality, was enough for me to start making the return back to not feeling that way.
You said you started making the return, right?
Yeah.
And then I think where people kind of get it twisted is like, all right, I made the decision. Doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to not treat me horribly that day. It's like, how do I interpret the things differently, right? So if I make the decision, hey, today's going to be a better day, and then like you say, hey, F you, Kemy, and then I'm like, oh, I guess today's not going to be a good day. If I shut it down there, versus I'm saying, okay, today's going to be a great day for me. I don't know what's happening with Jake, but I'm still gonna make the best version. Like that takes practice for sure. I'm not trying to oversimplify this, but it's like the decision, and then we got to keep looking for evidence that we're on the right path. Like you said, like we're kind of climbing out or walking out. Like we got to keep looking for evidence. Hey, I'm one day closer, or I'm one step closer to feeling better. Hey, I felt better for 10 minutes today compared to 0 minutes yesterday. That's an improvement, right? We can't just expect 0 to 100, but we can. If we look for those small steps, we know that we're on the right path.
I think that, what we were talking about with the whole depression thing is it's so powerful, and we could do a whole podcast on that
absolutely.
Alone. But I think that we said a lot of really good stuff on it. I'm curious, is there a like crown achievement or something that you've done in your career that stands out? Maybe even one or two things that stands out to you as like a highlight of your speaking career so far?
Well, I think what we just described is one of those highlights of just making it to this point, right? We just covered racism, prejudice, and depression. I think all those things apply in the same way. So for me, like figuring that out and just being like, oh, this is like a mental, these are basic mental conditions. Like, how do I like work on that to be able to help people? Like just that alone, even before I've actually accomplished it, feels like, oh man, like I'm reignited in my life, and I feel like I have a sense of purpose. And I think that has felt like a great accomplishment. And the other accomplishment is just having more people, like being actually able to add more value to people. I think that is like, I remember my first speeches, I literally had like pictures of like, audience members just like I'm over this guy already. Just to see the journey like over a decade where like people are loving to have me now, and I think just that alone is kind of surviving that, right? Because it's like it's easy to just be like, no more, I'm not gonna do this, and I totally wanted to quit, but it's like just surviving that alone feels like an accomplishment to be able to be at where I am right now.
Well, it says a lot about you as a person and your character that when I asked you the question of crown achievements, it wasn't like a one thing or like stage that you stood on. It was the getting to the place where you are in your journey,
Where I feel like I'm actually good at what I do.
Props to you on that, man. Thank you for coming through.
Yeah, man, thank you
We
for
could
this,
definitely
man.
talk for hours. And we'll definitely have to have you on the podcast again.
Yeah.
And thank you again, and it's been a pleasure. We'll get to the elementary school story next time.
Next time.
Thank you guys all for listening and watching out there. Fletcher, the Jake Fletcher Show coming at you, and make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet, and all that social media stuff. Where can we find you online?
Oh, you can find me right now mostly Instagram under Kemy Awesome, so Kemy and the word awesome because you are awesome.
Do it, guys. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.